there is a gate closing. Not opening, closing. And if you are watching this before midnight, if you found this transmission in this precise window of time, then what you are about to hear is not coincidence. It is not algorithm. It is not random content surfacing in a feed of infinite noise. Something in the architecture of your consciousness pulled this toward you because some part of you already knows what is happening right now, in this exact period of your life, in this exact window of time that is narrowing by the hour. The gate is closing, and you are standing at its edge. Most transmissions about gates talk about opening, about possibility, about the doors that swing wide when you are ready. This is not that transmission. This is the one that comes when the window is almost gone, when the activation period that has been building in your field, sometimes for months, sometimes for years, is reaching its final hours, when the version of you that could have crossed at any point during this entire cycle is now facing something different. A deadline, not a metaphorical deadline, not a spiritual concept dressed up in urgency, a real, actual, quantum deadline, the kind that exists in physics, in nature, in the behavior of systems that have been held in superposition for too long and are now collapsing into one of two possible states. You are about to collapse. The question is which state you collapse into. That is what this transmission is about. That is why you are here before midnight. That is why the thumbnail said emergency. Because it is, not in the way that makes you afraid, but in the way that makes you awake. The kind of emergency that clears everything else away and leaves and only the essential, only the real, only the choice that has been waiting at the center of everything you have been experiencing lately. So take a breath. You are at the gate. And tonight, before this window closes, you are going to understand exactly what that means. Let's start at the beginning. Not your beginning. The beginning of this particular threshold. Because every gate has an origin point. Every closing window had an opening. And if you trace back the last several weeks of your life, maybe the last several months, you will find the moment this activation cycle began. You might not have recognized it then. Most people don't. The beginning of a threshold period rarely announces itself. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or clarity. It arrives as disruption. Think about what started shifting. Maybe it was a relationship that began to feel like it belonged to a different version of you. Maybe it was a career, a living situation, a belief system that had served you for years and suddenly felt like clothes that no longer fit. Maybe it was something more internal, a restlessness that had no clear source, a hunger that nothing you tried could satisfy, a sense of standing in the middle of your own life and feeling like a stranger to it. Maybe it was the opposite of disruption. Maybe it was a sudden, inexplicable stillness, a quieting of things that used to be loud, a falling away of noise that left you in a silence that felt significant, that felt like it was pointing at something you couldn't quite name. That was the gate opening. That was the beginning of the activation window you are now in the final hours of. Here is what quantum mechanics tells us about this. And I want you to stay with me here because this is not metaphor. This is the actual mechanism of what is happening in your consciousness right now. In quantum physics, when a particle exists in superposition, it holds multiple possible states simultaneously. It is not in one place or another. It is in all possible places at once, weighted by probability. This is not a theoretical abstraction. This has been demonstrated, measured, replicated. The particle genuinely exists in multiple states at the same time until the moment of measurement, the moment of observation, when it collapses into a single definite state. But here is what most people don't know about superposition. It has limits. A quantum system cannot maintain superposition indefinitely under certain conditions. When environmental interference accumulates, when the system interacts with enough of its environment, the superposition degrades. Physicists call this decoherence. The quantum possibilities don't collapse all at once in a clean, chosen moment. They bleed out. They leak. The system loses its quantum nature not through a decisive crossing, but through gradual entropic dissolution. And when decoherence completes, the system is no longer in superposition. It is no longer holding multiple possible futures. It has settled, not into a chosen state, into whatever state the accumulated interference pushed it toward, not a conscious crossing, a drift. This is the emergency. You have been in superposition. You have been holding multiple versions of yourself simultaneously. The version that crosses this threshold and the version that doesn't. The version that steps through this gate and the version that turns back. And this superposition has been maintained by something extraordinary, by the fact that your consciousness has been actively engaging with its own potential, actively holding the field open, actively refusing to collapse prematurely. But superposition under interference has a clock, and your clock is running out. The midnight threshold in this transmission is not arbitrary. It is not a marketing device. It is a symbol that points at something real. The moment when the day ends and a new one begins. When one cycle closes and another opens. When the energy that has been building reaches its natural terminus. Midnight is the threshold between thresholds. It is the gate within the gate. And in the physics of consciousness, in the way awareness moves through cycles of activation and integration, there are real windows, real periods where the field is open, where the gate is accessible, where the crossing is available. And those windows close, not because the universe is punishing you, not because you failed, but because systems that hold open possibilities eventually must resolve. Because the energy required to maintain superposition, to hold multiple futures in active potential, has a cost, and that cost accumulates, and at some point the system must either cross or collapse. You are at that point tonight. So let's talk about what is actually on both sides of this gate. Because you cannot make an informed crossing, a conscious, chosen, fully inhabited crossing, if you don't understand what you are moving between. The gate is not just a symbol. It has two sides, and both sides are real. On the side you are standing on right now, the side you have been living on during this entire activation cycle, there is a version of you that is known, familiar, the you that has existed up to this point, with all of its patterns and histories and habitual ways of perceiving reality. This version of you has served you. I want to be clear about that. The person you have been, the consciousness you have been operating as, got you here, got you to this gate, got you to this transmission. That is not nothing. That is everything. You could not be standing at this threshold without every version of yourself that came before. But this version of you has a ceiling, and you know it. You know it because you have been feeling it. The ceiling is not a failure. It is a completion. The version of you on this side of the gate has completed its arc. It has learned what it came here to learn. It has done what it came here to do. And now it is pressing up against the boundary of what it can become within its current configuration. Like a caterpillar that has grown as much as a caterpillar can grow. Not because there is something wrong with it, but because the next stage of its becoming requires a different form entirely. The discomfort you have been feeling is not dysfunction. It is the pressure of a consciousness that has outgrown its current container. On the other side of the gate, the side that is accessible right now, in this window before it closes, there is a version of you that operates at a different frequency. Not better in a hierarchical sense, different in a fundamental, structural sense, a version of you that perceives reality through a wider aperture, that makes decisions from a deeper knowing, that experiences relationships, work, creativity, purpose, all of it, through a lens that the current version of you can only glimpse in moments of unusual clarity. You have had those moments. You know what I'm talking about. The moments where everything suddenly made sense, where you felt fully aligned, not performing alignment, not intellectually understanding alignment, but actually inhabiting it in your body, in your field, in the quality of your attention. The moments where synchronicities stacked on top of each other, so fast that you couldn't dismiss them as coincidence. The moments where you knew something before you could know it, where you acted from a certainty that had no logical basis and turned out to be exactly right. Those moments are not accidents. They are previews. They are the other side of the gate, briefly accessible through the cracks in your current state, showing you what is available, showing you the frequency you are capable of sustaining, not as a peak experience, not as an occasional glimpse, but as your baseline, as the ordinary operating state of the version of you that crosses this threshold. That is what is on the other side. That is what is available tonight. If this transmission is finding you at the right moment, take a second to like and subscribe. It helps more people find this at exactly the window they need it. And here is why tonight matters. Here is why the window is closing now, and not in 3 weeks or 6 months or whenever would be more convenient for you. Because activation windows are not determined by your schedule. They are determined by your field. And your field has been building toward this crossing for longer than you may realize. Think about the accumulation of the last cycle, not just weeks. Think about the arc. Think about the things you have been learning, the patterns you have been breaking, the beliefs you have been releasing, the relationships and situations and identities that have been falling away. Think about the work you have been doing, consciously or unconsciously, to prepare yourself for something you couldn't fully name. All of that has been building charge. Like a capacitor storing energy, your field has been accumulating the potential for a state change. And capacitors don't hold charge indefinitely. They either discharge in a directed, intentional way, a crossing, or they bleed out through resistance. The charge in your field right now is at its peak. This is the maximum potential moment. This is when the gate is most open, when the frequency differential between where you are and where you are going is most bridgeable, when the crossing requires the least force, because the energy is already aligned with the transition. This is the activation window, and it is closing. Not because you did something wrong, not because you aren't ready, but because this is how activation cycles work. The peak is followed by integration. The window is followed by the door closing. The extraordinary charge of a threshold moment cannot be maintained indefinitely. It must either be used or it dissipates, and the next window requires rebuilding from a lower baseline. I want to be honest with you about what it means if the window closes without a crossing. It doesn't mean you are lost. It doesn't mean the gate disappears forever. Gates don't disappear, but they do recede. They do require more energy to reach again. The version of you that could have crossed tonight, in this window, with this charge, in this alignment, that version has to work harder to reach the same threshold from a lower energy state. The next window will come, but it will require rebuilding what was already built, reaccumulating what was already accumulated, reapproaching what was already approached. And here is the deeper truth. Every time you stand at a gate and turn back, the gate becomes slightly harder to approach next time. not because the universe is punishing you, but because your nervous system learns. Your consciousness learns. And what it learns when you turn back is that gates are not for crossing, that the threshold is a place to approach and retreat from, not a place to move through. That pattern, approach, retreat, approach, retreat, becomes encoded. It becomes the habitual response to threshold energy. And eventually, the approach itself stops happening because the unconscious has learned that approaching only leads to retreating. This is how people spend entire lifetimes standing at gates they never cross. This is the real emergency, not tonight's deadline. The pattern that tonight's deadline is trying to interrupt. So let's talk about what is actually happening in your consciousness right now. Because I want you to understand the mechanism. Not just feel the urgency, but understand the architecture of what is occurring in your field so that you can work with it consciously, so that you can make this crossing with full awareness of what you are doing and why. There is a concept in physics called a phase transition. You know it from everyday experience, even if you don't know the term. Water becoming ice, ice becoming steam. The moment when a substance crosses a threshold of temperature and pressure and transforms into a fundamentally different state. Not just a change in degree, a change in kind. The molecules are the same. The atoms are the same, but the structure, the behavior, the properties, everything that makes the substance what it is, transforms completely. Phase transitions are not gradual. This is the crucial point. You might think that water getting colder gradually becomes ice gradually, that there is a smooth, linear transition from liquid to solid. But that is not what happens. What happens is that water cools and cools and cools, changing in degree but not in kind until it reaches a precise threshold temperature. And then, at that threshold, it crosses, not gradually, all at once. One moment it is water, the next it is ice. The transition is discontinuous. It is a crossing, not a slope. This is how consciousness evolves, not gradually, not through slow, incremental improvement along a continuous line, through phase transitions, through threshold crossings, through moments where the accumulated change of every previous experience, every previous lesson, every previous release and integration, where all of that suddenly tips the system across a critical threshold and everything changes at once. You have been in the cooling phase. You have been accumulating the change that makes the phase transition possible. Every difficult conversation you had and didn't run from. Every old pattern you recognized and interrupted. Every belief you questioned and released. Every moment of fear you moved through anyway. Every time you chose the harder, truer thing over the easier, comfortable thing, all of that has been cooling you toward the threshold. All of that has been building the conditions for the phase transition that is available tonight. And now, you are at the threshold temperature. You are at the exact point where the crossing is available, where the phase transition is ready to occur, where the accumulated change tips from quantitative to qualitative, from more of the same to something fundamentally different. The gate is open. You are standing at it right now. The question is whether you will cross. And I want to address something here, because I know what is happening in some part of your mind as you listen to this. There is a voice, probably a quiet one, maybe not so quiet, that is raising objections, that is listing the reasons why tonight isn't quite right. Why you need a little more time. Why you should wait until you feel more ready. Why the conditions aren't perfectly aligned. Why there are things you still need to work through, still need to understand, still need to resolve before you can fully step through. That voice is not your wisdom. That voice is the guardian of your current state. It is the part of your consciousness that is tasked with maintaining the existing configuration, the part that experiences any change, even positive change, as a threat to its survival. Because from the perspective of the current version of you, crossing this threshold is a kind of death. The version of you that exists on this side of the gate will not exist on the other side, not because you will be harmed, but because you will have transformed. And transformation, from the inside, can feel indistinguishable from dissolution. The caterpillar, inside the chrysalis, dissolves, actually dissolves. The cellular structure breaks down. The organized form of the caterpillar liquefies into undifferentiated biological material before it reorganizes into a butterfly. From inside the chrysalis, in the middle of that process, there is no butterfly yet. There is only the dissolution of the caterpillar, the loss of the known form, the terrifying in-between where what you were is gone and what you are becoming has not yet emerged. That is the threshold. That is what the voice is trying to protect you from. And it is not wrong that the dissolution is real. It is not wrong that something ends when you cross. Something does end. The version of you that has been operating in the frequency of your current state, that version ends. And the voice that is trying to protect that version is doing its job. It is being exactly what it is designed to be. But it is not the only voice. There is another voice, quieter usually, deeper, the one that brought you to this transmission, the one that has been restless and hungry and pressing against the ceiling of your current configuration, the one that knows, not believes, not hopes, but knows that there is more, that you are capable of more, that the life you are living is not the life you are here to live, that the version of you that exists right now is not the final version, not the full version, not the version that gets to experience what is actually available to your consciousness in this lifetime. That voice brought you here. That voice is standing at the gate, looking through, telling you what it sees. The question is which voice you are going to listen to tonight. I want to tell you about someone. Let's call her Mara. She had spent years doing everything right. By every external measure, her life was a success. Career that commanded respect. Relationships that looked healthy from the outer. A spiritual practice she had maintained for over a decade. Filling notebooks with insights. Attending retreats. Reading everything she could find about consciousness and awakening and the nature of reality. She knew the vocabulary. She could speak fluently about surrender and presence and the nature of ego. She had accumulated more understanding than most people she knew. And she was miserable. Not dramatically miserable. Not in crisis. Just quietly, persistently, deeply miserable in the way that only people who know better can be miserable, with the added weight of knowing they know better and still being unable to move. She came to a threshold moment 3 times in 5 years. The first time, she was at a retreat. Something cracked open in her during a meditation. Not metaphorically. It felt physical, like a fissure opening in the center of her chest. She could feel the gate. She could feel what was on the other side. And she retreated. She told herself she wasn't ready. She told herself she needed to process what had happened before she could go further. She spent the next 6 months processing, journaling, talking to her therapist, reading more books, and the gate receded. The crack closed. The charge she had built dissipated into intellectual analysis, and she was back where she started, slightly more sophisticated in her understanding of why she hadn't crossed. The second time, it came through a relationship. Someone entered her life who seemed to see through every layer of performance she had built around herself, who reflected back to her not the version of herself she had constructed, but the version underneath, the real one. The one she was terrified of and hungry for in equal measure. The gate opened in the space between them. She could feel it, and she engineered the relationship's end before anything real could happen. She found reasons. She found flaws. She created distance with such elegant precision that she could almost convince herself it was the other person's fault. The gate closed. The charge dissipated. She was alone again in the familiar. The third time, she was sitting in her car in a parking lot at 11:47 at night. She had just driven home from a dinner party where she had spent 3 hours performing the version of herself that everyone expected. And sitting in that parking lot, engine off, she felt it again. The gate. More urgent this time. More insistent. Like something pressing against the inside of her chest, trying to get out. Or trying to get in. She couldn't tell the difference anymore. She sat there for over an hour, and this time, she didn't retreat. She didn't know what crossing looked like. She didn't have a ritual or a practice or a clear next step. She just sat there and said out loud to no one, to the gate itself, "I'm done protecting what I've been protecting. I don't know what's on the other side. I don't know who I become. But I am done choosing the known over the real." That was the crossing. Not a dramatic event, not a mystical experience, not a moment she could point to and describe in a way that would make sense to someone else. Just a decision, made alone in a parking lot at 11:47 at night, to stop retreating from the gate. Everything changed after that. Not immediately. Not all at once in a way that was visible from the outside. But the quality of her experience shifted. The ceiling she had been pressing against, gone. Not because her circumstances changed overnight, but because the version of her that was pressing against the ceiling was no longer the operating system. A new version had come online. One that didn't experience the same ceiling because it was operating in a different dimensional space entirely. The career transformed within 8 months. Not because she made strategic moves, but because the new version of her made decisions the old version never would have. From a deeper knowing, a clearer signal, a willingness to trust what she felt over what she could justify. The relationships transformed. Some fell away, gently, without drama, simply completing. New ones arrived that felt nothing like the relationships she had known before. Deeper, realer. Without the performance she had always thought was required. The spiritual practice transformed. All the understanding she had accumulated for a decade suddenly activated. Like she had been collecting kindling for years, and the crossing was the match. Everything ignited at once. She told me once that the parking lot moment felt like nothing. Like the least dramatic thing that could possibly constitute a life-changing event. Just a woman in a car, talking to herself, deciding something. But that's what crossing the gate looks like from the outside. From the inside, it is everything. From the inside, it is the moment the superposition collapses into the state you actually want. The moment the phase transition begins. The moment the caterpillar stops resisting the chrysalis and lets the dissolution happen. If you can feel yourself in Mara's story, standing at the gate, knowing what is on the other side, feeling the urgency of a window that will not stay open. There is a complete guide written for exactly this moment. The sealed timeline maps the full crossing from diagnosis through collapse through threshold to sealed coherence, the precise 5-phase sequence that makes the new state irreversible rather than a peak you visit and lose. You'll find it in the description below. I want to pause here and ask you something directly. Have you had a moment like Mara's parking lot? A moment when you knew, with absolute certainty, that you were standing at a point of no return? A moment when everything in your life seemed to arrive at the same edge at the same time, and you could feel that whatever you chose next would define the version of you that came after? Drop that moment in the comments. Not the analysis of it, the feeling of it. What it was like to be standing exactly there. You are in your parking lot right now. You might be literally sitting somewhere quiet, having found this transmission in a moment of solitude. Or you might be surrounded by people, but feeling the same quality of aloneness that Mara felt in that car. The aloneness of someone standing at a threshold that no one else can see. The aloneness of the crossing point, which is always traversed alone, which cannot be delegated or witnessed or shared in the moment of actual crossing. You are at the gate, and the clock is moving. So let's do something now. Let's stop describing the gate and start approaching it, because there is a practice available to you in this window, a threshold crossing practice that is designed specifically for this moment, for this activation period, for the closing of this particular window. And I want to walk you through it now, while the charge is at its peak, while the gate is at its most accessible, while the frequency differential is at its most bridgeable. Find a comfortable position, not relaxed, comfortable. There is a difference. Relaxed implies a softening, a letting go of attention. What you want right now is the opposite. A gathering of attention, a focusing of awareness, a bringing of your full consciousness to bear on this moment. Sit in a way that feels alert, alive, like you are about to receive something important, because you are. Close your eyes if you can. If you are in a situation where that's not possible, soften your gaze. Let your eyes rest without focusing on anything specific. Let your visual field go slightly diffuse while your inner attention sharpens. Now feel the quality of the moment, not the content of your thoughts, not the narrative of your life. Just the quality, the texture, the energetic signature of right now. Notice what is present in your body. Not what you think should be present, not what you want to be present, but what is actually there. The sensations, the areas of tension or openness, the places where energy is moving, and the places where it feels stuck. This is your current state. This is the side of the gate you are standing on. Feel it fully. Don't judge it. Don't try to change it. Just feel it completely as it is. The discomfort that might be there, feel it. The hunger, feel it. The restlessness, the pressure, the sense of something pressing against a boundary. Feel all of it. This is the charge that has been building. This is the accumulated potential of your entire activation cycle. Let it be fully present. Now I want you to do something unusual. I want you to feel the gate. Not visualize it. Feel it. Because the gate is not a visual phenomenon. It is a felt sense. It is a quality of presence, a texture of reality that is distinct from the ordinary texture of your experience. It feels like a threshold, like standing at the edge of something. like the moment before you jump into cold water, that heightened crystalline aliveness that comes from being at the exact boundary between two states. Can you feel it? It might be subtle. It might be strong. It might feel like pressure in your chest, or your throat, or your forehead. It might feel like a quality of electricity in the air around you. It might feel like a stillness that is somehow more alive than motion. However it presents for you, that is the gate. That is the threshold between the version of you that exists right now and the version that is waiting on the other side. Stay at the edge for a moment. Don't cross yet. Just be at the edge. Feel what it feels like to be exactly here, at the boundary, at the threshold, at the gate. Feel the version of you that exists on this side. Feel the accumulated history of everything that brought you here. Feel the weight of the patterns you have been carrying, the stories you have been telling, the ways of seeing and being that have defined your experience up to this point. Feel all of it. And now, without forcing, without straining, without trying to make anything happen, feel what is on the other side. Not what you want to be on the other side. Not your wish list, or your goals, or your vision board. The actual frequency of what is there. The actual quality of the state that is available through this gate. Let your consciousness reach toward it, not grasp, reach. Like reaching your hand through a doorway to feel the temperature of the air on the other side. What do you feel? Most people, when they do this, feel something that surprises them. Not a dramatic vision, not a clear picture of a changed life. Just a quality, a frequency, a sense of something that is simultaneously deeply familiar and completely new. Like recognizing a version of yourself you have never met, but somehow always known. Like coming home to a place you have never been. That quality is real. That is not imagination. That is not wishful thinking. That is the actual frequency of the state that is available to you through this crossing. Your consciousness is touching it right now, not through effort, but through proximity. You are close enough to the gate that your awareness can reach through it. Stay with that feeling. Now, here is the practice. Here is the threshold crossing itself. I want you to make a statement, not a prayer, not an affirmation, not a request. A statement, a declaration of crossing. Something that your consciousness can use as the signal, the measurement, in quantum terms, that collapses the superposition into the state you are choosing. It doesn't need to be elaborate. It doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be true. Something like, I am crossing. I am choosing the version of me on the other side of this gate. I release what I have been protecting. I step through. Or whatever words arise naturally for you, because the words themselves are less important than the quality of intention behind them. The words are the vehicle. The intention is the crossing. Say it now, internally or out loud. Both work. Out loud is more powerful if you can. There is something about giving voice to a threshold decision that makes it real in a way that internal declaration cannot quite match. The vibration of your voice in the physical world is a commitment that the physical world can register. Say it. And as you say it, feel the gate. Feel yourself at the threshold. And then step through. This might feel like nothing. It might feel like everything. It might feel like a subtle shift in the quality of your awareness, a slight change in the texture of your experience, a sense of something releasing that you have been holding for a long time. It might feel like a wave of emotion, grief for the version of you that you are leaving behind, or relief, or a joy that has no clear source, or all of these at once. It might feel like nothing at all in this moment, and you might notice the difference tomorrow, or next week, or in 3 months when you look back and realize that everything started changing from this night. However it feels, it is real. The crossing is real. You have stepped through. Take a breath now, a long, slow breath, and let your awareness settle on the other side. Notice the quality of this state. Notice what is different, even subtly, even barely perceptibly. Notice if the quality of your inner silence has changed. If the texture of your awareness has shifted, if there is something present now that was not present before, or something absent that was present before, you are on the other side of the gate. This is the beginning of what changes. Let me tell you what the other side looks like. Not in terms of circumstances. Those will shift, and they will shift in ways specific to your life and your path and your particular version of this crossing. But in terms of the quality of experience, in terms of what it feels like to operate from the frequency that is available on this side of the gate, the first thing that changes is the quality of your knowing. On the side you came from, knowing was primarily cognitive. You knew things because you had learned them, reasoned them out, been told them, accumulated evidence for them. Your knowing had a kind of lag. You would experience something, then analyze it, then understand it, then know it. The sequence was experience, then knowing. On this side of the gate, knowing precedes experience. You will find yourself knowing things before you can explain how you know them. Not always dramatically. Sometimes it is as simple as knowing which direction to turn, which choice to make, which person to trust, before any logical analysis has occurred. The signal comes first. The justification, if you seek one, comes after, and you will find that the signal is reliable in a way that your previous cognitive knowing was not. Not because you have become psychic, but because you are now operating from a level of awareness that has access to more information than your conscious mind was previously processing. This is not mystical. This is the natural consequence of crossing a frequency threshold. Higher frequency states process more information per unit of awareness, like upgrading from a limited bandwidth connection to a high-speed one. The same reality, but more of it available at once. The second thing that changes is the quality of your relationships. Every relationship in your life will reorganize around your new frequency. Some relationships will deepen in ways that surprise you. People you thought you knew will reveal dimensions of themselves that were not previously accessible, because the version of you that existed before the crossing was not operating at the frequency that could perceive those dimensions. Other relationships will complete, gently, without drama, simply arriving at their natural conclusion. Not because anything went wrong, but because they were calibrated to the frequency of the version of you that no longer exists. And new relationships will arrive. People who are calibrated to the frequency of the version of you that just crossed. People who will recognize you in a way you may not have been recognized before. People who will meet the real version, not the performed version, not the protected version, but the actual frequency of who you are on this side of the gate. The third thing that changes is your relationship with time. This one surprises people. On the other side of the gate, time feels different. Not longer or shorter, but more dense, more real. Like each moment has more substance, more texture, more presence than moments had before. The experience of being alive becomes more vivid. Not more dramatic, but more vivid. Like adjusting the resolution of a screen from standard to high definition. The content is the same, but the clarity is different. The aliveness is different. Simultaneously, the future feels closer. Not in the sense of impatience, the opposite. In the sense that the gap between where you are and where you are going feels smaller, more bridgeable, more like a matter of steps than a matter of years. This is because on the other side of the gate, you are operating in alignment with your actual trajectory, not the trajectory your old patterns were creating, but the trajectory your consciousness is genuinely moving toward. And when you are aligned with your actual trajectory, the distance to your destination is always shorter than it appeared from the misaligned position. The fourth thing that changes is what I can only describe as your gravity. Every consciousness has a gravitational field, a quality of presence that influences the reality around it. Before the crossing, your gravitational field was calibrated to the frequency of your old state. It was attracting, unconsciously, automatically, the circumstances, opportunities, and experiences that matched that frequency. After the crossing, your gravitational field recalibrates, and what it begins to attract changes. Not immediately. Recalibration takes time. The old patterns have momentum. But within weeks, sometimes days, you will begin to notice that what is showing up in your life is different, that the quality of the opportunities presenting themselves has shifted, that the synchronicities are more frequent and more precise, that the things you have been working toward and seemingly not reaching are suddenly closer, more accessible, more available than they were before. This is not magic. This is physics. When the frequency of your consciousness changes, the frequency of what resonates with it changes. Like a radio tuned to a new station. Same radio, same world, but completely different signal. The signal was always there. You just couldn't receive it from the old frequency. Now you can. There is something I want to address directly now, because this transmission would be incomplete without it. And it requires a kind of honesty that not all transmissions about threshold crossings are willing to offer. Crossing the gate is not the end of difficulty. I want to be absolutely clear about this. The other side of the gate is not a difficulty-free zone. It is not a place where everything is easy and nothing is hard, and all your problems dissolve into light. The other side of the gate is a different frequency, not a different reality. You still live in this world. You still have a body, a history, a set of circumstances that were created by the version of you that existed before the crossing. Those circumstances don't disappear overnight. What changes is not the presence of difficulty. What changes is your relationship to it. On this side of the gate, difficulty is information, not punishment, not evidence that you are wrong or broken or not spiritual enough. Information. Feedback from reality about where alignment is needed, where attention is required, where growth is available. The version of you on this side of the gate doesn't experience difficulty as something happening to you. It experiences difficulty as something happening for you, as the precise friction required to develop the specific capacities that your consciousness needs to develop at this stage of its evolution. This shift in relationship to difficulty is one of the most practically significant changes that comes with crossing the threshold. Because when difficulty is information rather than punishment, you stop spending energy defending against it, or resenting it, or trying to make it stop. You start spending that energy engaging with it, extracting the information, making the adjustment, developing the capacity, moving forward. The energy freed up by that shift alone is extraordinary. There is also this. Crossing the gate brings you into contact with the next gate, because consciousness doesn't have a final destination. There is no arrival point where you have crossed all the thresholds and are now complete. The crossing you make tonight opens a new cycle, a new activation period, a new building of charge, a new approach to a new threshold. The version of you that emerges from tonight's crossing will, in time, find itself standing at another gate, a higher gate, A gate that the version of you before tonight couldn't even perceive. This is not a reason to hesitate. It is a reason to cross. Because the gates you reach from the other side of this one are gates you cannot currently imagine. The possibilities available to the version of you that crosses tonight are not visible from the version of you that hasn't. You cannot see where you are going from where you are standing. You can only trust the signal, the knowing that something is on the other side, that the frequency you felt when you reached through the gate is real, that the version of you that exists there is not a fantasy, but a genuine potential that is available to you in this lifetime. Trust the signal. Cross the gate. Now I want to speak to something that might be present for some of you. A specific kind of resistance that is different from the ordinary voice of self-protection. This is the resistance that comes from having crossed gates before and found that the crossing didn't stick, that the new frequency didn't hold, that within days or weeks you were back on the other side of the gate, operating from the old patterns, wondering if the crossing had been real at all. This is a real experience, and it deserves a real answer. When a crossing doesn't hold, it is not because the crossing wasn't real. It is because the integration wasn't complete. The crossing is the moment of phase transition, the moment the superposition collapses, the moment the threshold is crossed. But a phase transition requires conditions to maintain the new state. Ice requires temperature below freezing to remain ice. A new frequency of consciousness requires an environment, internal and external, that supports the new state. If you cross the gate and then immediately return to all the same environments, all the same inputs, all the same habitual patterns of thought and behavior and relationship, the new frequency doesn't have the conditions it needs to stabilize. The old frequency is still dominant in your environment. And consciousness, like water, takes the shape of its container. This is why integration matters as much as the crossing. And this is why tonight is not just about the moment of crossing. It is about what you do in the days and weeks following the crossing. The choices you make to support the new frequency. The environments you curate. The inputs you allow. The relationships you invest in. The practices you maintain. The ways you choose, consciously and repeatedly, to operate from the new state rather than defaulting to the old one. The crossing opens the gate. Integration is walking through it all the way and building your life on the other side. So what does integration look like? What are the actual, practical, embodied actions that support a threshold crossing in the days and weeks that follow? The first is what I call frequency anchoring. In the hours and days after a crossing, your awareness is more permeable than usual, more open, more sensitive, more easily influenced. This is a gift and a vulnerability. It is a gift because it means new information, new connections, New perceptions are more accessible than they would normally be. It is a vulnerability because it means old patterns, old environments, old frequencies can pull you back more easily than they could if you were fully stabilized in the new state. Frequency anchoring means consciously choosing, in those first days, to spend time in environments and with inputs that support the new frequency. This might mean more time in silence and less time in noise. More time in nature and less time in artificial environments. More time with people who operate at a frequency that supports your crossing, and less time with people who are calibrated to your old state. More time with your own direct experience, and less time with content that tells you what to experience. This is not about cutting people off or making dramatic changes. It is about being conscious in those first days, about what you are allowing to influence your field while it is stabilizing. The second is what I call decision-making from the new state. Every decision you make in the days following a crossing is either an investment in the new frequency or a withdrawal from it. When you face a choice, even a small one, and you choose from the old pattern, the old fear, the old contracted sense of what is possible, you are making a withdrawal. You are feeding the old frequency. When you face a choice and you pause, feel the gate, feel the frequency of the new state, and choose from that. You are making an investment. You are feeding the new frequency. You are giving it energy and substance and reality. Small decisions compound. The choice of what to eat, how to spend an hour, who to call, what to say yes to, and what to say no to. These seem trivial. They are not trivial. They are the substance of your frequency. They are the material from which your new state is either built or eroded. Choose consciously. The third is what I call threshold journaling. In the days and weeks following a crossing, your consciousness is processing an enormous amount of change, most of it below the level of conscious awareness. Threshold journaling is the practice of giving that processing a channel, not journaling about your thoughts or your feelings or your day. Journaling specifically about what is changing, what you are noticing, what is different, what is completing, and what is beginning, what the new frequency feels like as it stabilizes. This practice does two things. It makes the changes visible, which makes them real, which makes them more stable, and it creates a record that you can return to when the new state feels uncertain, when the old patterns reassert themselves, when you need to remind yourself that the crossing was real, and the changes are real, and you are on the other side of the gate. Write it down. The fourth is what I call community alignment. You cannot cross a gate and sustain the crossing in isolation. Consciousness is fundamentally relational. It exists in and through connection. and the frequency of your connections influences the frequency of your state. Finding even one other person who is operating at a frequency aligned with your new state. Someone who can see the version of you that crossed, who can reflect that version back to you, who can hold the frequency of your new state in their perception of you. This is one of the most powerful integration tools available. This is why communities built around threshold crossing are not optional extras. They are structural necessities. The version of you that crossed tonight needs to be seen by someone who knows what crossing looks like, needs to be held by a field that supports the new frequency, needs to be in relationship with others who are in their own crossing process, who understand the language of gates and thresholds and phase transitions, because they are living it too. If you have not found that community yet, that is one of the most important next steps available to you on the other side of this gate. Now let's talk about the specific nature of the window that is closing tonight. Because I have been speaking in general terms about activation cycles and threshold crossings, and I want to get more specific about what this particular window is and why it is significant. We are in a period of extraordinary collective threshold energy. Not just individual crossings, collective ones. The systems, structures, and stories that have organized human consciousness for generations are themselves in a phase transition. The old configurations are completing. The new ones are emerging. And in this environment, individual threshold crossings are amplified. The charge available to a person who is ready to cross is greater than it would be in a period of collective stability, because the collective field is itself generating threshold energy. Think of it like this. If you are trying to start a fire, it is easier in a dry environment than in a wet one. The conditions support combustion. Right now, the collective field is dry, charged with the energy of transformation, saturated with the potential for change. Your individual crossing is happening in this environment. The collective charge is available to you. The activation energy required for your threshold crossing is lower than it would be at any other time, because the surrounding field is contributing to the transition. This is why now. This is why this window matters. The confluence of your personal activation cycle, the charge you have been building in your own field, and the collective threshold energy of this period creates a window of extraordinary accessibility. The gate that might require enormous effort to reach in a period of collective stability is right here, right now, at your fingertips, because the collective field is amplifying your personal threshold. And this window is time-limited. Collective threshold periods don't last indefinitely. They have their own cycles, their own activation windows, their own moments of peak charge and subsequent integration. The window that is open right now, the confluence of your personal cycle and the collective field, is not permanent. It is a specific alignment that exists in this period and will not exist in exactly this form again. This is the emergency, not fear, not threat, not punishment if you miss it, but the real, practical, quantum mechanical fact that optimal conditions for crossing are time-limited, and the optimal conditions are present right now, and the clock is moving. So let me ask you directly, what is the thing you have been waiting to become? Not what you want to have, not what you want to achieve, what you want to become. The version of yourself that you have been approaching and retreating from. The frequency you have touched in moments of unusual clarity and then lost again. The quality of being that you know is available to you but have not been able to sustain. That is what is on the other side of this gate. That is what the closing window is offering. And here is the deepest truth about threshold crossings that I want to leave you with before we move into the final passage of this transmission. You already know how to cross. You have crossed before. Not this gate. This specific threshold is new. But you have crossed thresholds before. You have made decisions that changed everything. You have let go of things that felt impossible to release. You have stepped into uncertainty and found solid ground on the other side. You have been at gates before and crossed them, and you know, in your body, in your bones, in the part of you that holds all your history, what crossing feels like. It feels like this, it feels like exactly this. The mix of urgency and aliveness and fear, and something that is larger than fear. The sense of standing at the edge of something vast. The quality of attention that comes when you know something real is happening. You know this feeling. You have been here before, and you crossed. That is the evidence, not hope, not theory, evidence. You have crossed thresholds before. The version of you sitting here right now is the result of every threshold you have previously crossed. Every gate you stepped through created the you that is sitting here. Every crossing built the capacity for the next one. Every threshold you navigated gave you the capability to navigate this one. You are not approaching this gate as a beginner. You are approaching it as someone who has been training for exactly this crossing through every previous crossing of your life. You are ready. You have always been ready. The gate is open. Right now, in this moment, in this final window before midnight, in this activation period that has been building toward exactly this point, the gate is open. The frequency differential is at its most bridgeable. The charge is at its peak. The collective field is amplifying your personal threshold. The conditions for crossing are optimal. This is the moment. Not because I am telling you it is, not because the urgency of this transmission has created an artificial pressure, but because your own consciousness brought you here to this transmission, in this window, at this hour, because the part of you that knows recognized this as the moment, because the gate is open and you can feel it. You have been feeling it. You felt it before you started this transmission. You felt it in the weeks and months of your activation cycle. You felt it in the restlessness and the hunger and the pressure against the ceiling of your current state. You have been feeling the gate this whole time, and now you are standing at it. And the window is closing. So let's arrive at the final passage of this transmission. The part where we move from understanding to being, from approach to arrival, from standing at the gate to standing on the other side. I want you to feel, one more time, the full weight of what you are carrying on this side of the gate. Not to judge it, not to condemn it, to honor it, to acknowledge it fully before you release it. Because what you are carrying, the patterns, the stories, the ways of being that have defined the version of you that exists right now, it has served you. It got you here. It built the charge that makes this crossing possible. It is not the enemy. It is the foundation. Feel it. The ways you have protected yourself that no longer need protecting. The stories you have told about what is possible for you that are smaller than what is actually possible. The habits of contraction, the places where you have made yourself smaller, quieter, less than you are, to fit into spaces that were never quite the right shape for you. The relationships you have maintained through performance rather than presence. The version of yourself you have been showing to the world that is accurate but incomplete, true as far as it goes, but not the full frequency of who you are. Feel all of it. And now, with gratitude, with acknowledgement, with the respect that comes from understanding what it has done for you, release it, not by forcing it away, not by rejecting it, by simply letting it go, by unclenching the hand that has been holding it, by allowing the superposition to collapse, by making the measurement that determines the state. You are the new state. You are the frequency on the other side of the gate. You are the version of yourself that you have been approaching this whole time. Not in the future. Now, in this moment, on this side of the transmission, in this window before midnight closes, you are already the version of yourself that crossed. The crossing is not something that will happen. It is something that is happening. It is something that has been happening since the moment you found this transmission. Since the moment your consciousness recognized the gate. Since the moment the part of you that knows pulled you toward this exact window of time. You have been crossing the whole time. The gate is not in front of you. You are already through it. And what you are standing in now, this quality of awareness, this frequency of being, this state of having crossed, this is the other side. This is what you were approaching. This is what the activation cycle was building toward. This is the new state. the new frequency, the new version of you that operates from a wider aperture, a deeper knowing, a clearer signal. Feel it, not as something you are trying to reach, as something you are already inhabiting. This is the quantum truth of threshold crossings. The crossing doesn't happen at a future moment. It happens at the moment of recognition. At the moment, your consciousness acknowledges the new state as real, as present, as already inhabited. The superposition collapses not when you decide to cross, but when you recognize that you have already crossed, that the version of you capable of crossing has always been the version you are, and the crossing is simply the moment that version becomes the operating system. You are the operating system now. The gate is behind you. Welcome to the other side. In the days ahead, the days of integration that follow this crossing, there are things I want you to remember, not as rules, as anchors, as reminders that you can return to when the old frequency tries to reassert itself, when the familiar patterns pull at you, when the voice that protected the old state tells you that nothing really changed, that you are the same person you were before, that the crossing wasn't real. Remember this: you felt the gate, not as a concept, as a felt sense, as a quality of reality that was distinct from ordinary experience. That felt sense is real. It is evidence. It is the direct experience of the threshold, and direct experience is the most reliable evidence available to consciousness. Remember this: the charge was real. The activation cycle you have been in, the months of building, releasing, approaching, that was real. You can trace it. You can feel the arc of it. The charge that has been accumulating in your field is not a story you told yourself. It is a real energetic phenomenon, and the crossing is its real resolution. Remember this: the frequency you felt on the other side of the gate is real. When you reached through the gate and felt the quality of what was there, that was not imagination. That was your consciousness making contact with a genuine available state. The frequency is real. The state is real. The version of you that inhabits it is real. And you are now in the process of stabilizing that state, of making it your baseline, of building your life on the other side of the gate. Remember this: the window was real. The urgency of this transmission was not manufactured. The activation window that is closing is not a metaphor. The time-limited nature of optimal threshold conditions is a real phenomenon. You found this transmission in this window because your consciousness recognized the window. That recognition is evidence of the crossing. And remember this: you are not alone in this crossing. Somewhere in the field right now, in this moment, as you listen to these final words, there are others who are crossing the same threshold, others who found this transmission in this window, Others who are standing at their own version of this gate, feeling their own version of this charge, making their own version of this decision. You are crossing in community, even if you cannot see the others. The collective field of everyone who is crossing in this period is a real field, and you are part of it, and it supports you. You are not alone at the gate. You are never alone at the gate. The gate is open. The window is closing. You have crossed. Now, go build your life on the other side. In the comments below this transmission, I want to hear from you. Not a report of what you understood intellectually. A report of what you felt, what shifted, what you noticed when you reached through the gate. What the quality of the other side feels like for you. What you are releasing and what you are stepping into. Your words in the comments are not just for me. They are for everyone else who is crossing in this window. Your testimony of the crossing is an anchor for others who are still approaching the gate. Your willingness to say, out loud, in the public record of this community, that you crossed, that is itself an act of integration. That is itself a frequency anchor. That is itself a contribution to the collective field of this threshold period. Share what is true. Share what is real. Share what you felt. And if there is someone in your life who is standing at a gate right now, someone you can feel is in their own activation cycle, their own threshold period, their own approach to a crossing they may not have language for. Share this transmission with them, not as a prescription, not as a directive, as an offering, as the thing that might give them the language for what they are already experiencing, as the gate that might be waiting for them in the form of a transmission they found at exactly the right moment. When you share this, you are not just passing along a video. You are building a bridge. You are extending the field of the crossing into their world. And something extraordinary happens when two people recognize the same threshold together. Both fields strengthen. Both crossings deepen. The shared recognition itself becomes a form of crossing. If this transmission found you at the right moment, sit with it again in a quiet hour, at night, in stillness, when you can feel the gate without the noise, and then send it to the person you already know needs it. The gate finds people when they are ready. You can be the gate for someone who is ready. One final thing before this transmission closes. The version of you that exists on the other side of this gate, the version that crossed tonight, in this window, at this threshold, that version has a responsibility, not a burden. A responsibility in the original sense of the word, the ability to respond, the capacity to meet what arises from a place of genuine capability rather than reactive pattern. The version of you that crossed tonight has more capacity than the version that approached the gate. More access, more signal, more ability to respond to what life brings with genuine presence rather than habitual reaction. That capacity is not for you alone. It is for everything your life touches, for the people in your sphere, for the work you are here to do, for the contribution that only you, in your specific frequency, in your specific configuration, can make to the collective field. The crossing is not just for you. It never was. Every threshold crossing that any individual makes raises the frequency of the collective field. Every person who crosses a gate makes the next gate slightly more accessible for everyone who comes after. Every consciousness that evolves through a phase transition contributes to the conditions that make the next phase transition possible, not just for themselves, but for the whole. You crossed tonight not just for the version of you that exists on the other side. You crossed for everyone whose life will be touched by that version, for everyone who will encounter the frequency of who you are becoming and feel something in themselves respond. Feel their own gate slightly more accessible, their own crossing slightly more possible, their own threshold slightly closer. This is the quantum entanglement of consciousness evolution. We cross together, even when we cross alone. The gate is behind you. The window has closed. And on this side, the side you are on now, everything is different. Not because the world changed, because you did. And that is enough. That is everything. The gate is open. You crossed. There is no going back. Welcome home. If this transmission landed for you, the one called If You're Seeing This Before April 21st, a quantum gate just opened, and it won't stay open. Long is the next field to move through. The same architecture, a different window, and the version of you that just crossed this gate will receive it at a completely different depth.